this one right here is the one that kind of triggered me. But let's watch the entire thing. There's 5 parts. That's how long it was.
They're going to have the right to compel unwanted medical interventions on us. The Nazis did that in the camps in World War II. They tested vaccines on gypsies and Jews.
For years, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has made a name for himself as a conspiracy theorist. Of course, he is the son of former Senator and Attorney General Robert Kennedy, who himself ran for president in 1968. As a member of one of America's most well-known political families, Kennedy is now running against President Biden for the Democratic nomination. And so it is perhaps not surprising that Kennedy is polling fairly strongly for a challenger to an incumbent president at 17% among Democrats. What might surprise you is that his favorability rating is 40% among Republican voters, compared to 25% for Democrats and 31% for independents. There are a lot of reasons for this.
I'm going to bring that poll back up. So you have broad appeal. That's now a problem. Having broad appeal. Now, it's my opinion that there's a lot of Republicans that may vote for him, or conservative-leaning people that support him because of the COVID stuff. Literally, there's people that will live and die with RFK simply because of the COVID stuff. Now, our take on RFK. He's a disgusting Zionist. I don't give a fuck about him. But we have to be honest and talk about, he does have appeal, and there's certain reasons he have appeal. It's the vaccine stuff. It's the not believe in the government stuff. It's the don't trust these institutions stuff. It's the did I say COVID stuff if I didn't say it, and Ukraine stuff. So that's why I think he has appeal from Republicans, because Republicans currently right now, a lot of them are not for this Ukraine war. And then the COVID stuff that is right in his back pocket. And then how he wrote the book about Dr. Fauci. So that's why he has appeal. There's not anything in his particular in his sort of policies that gives him any sort of particular appeal, but those are the things that actually could, quite frankly, that bring anybody to this guy's because his stance on Ukraine, his stance on the establishment and these institutions, and then COVID. Those are kind of the 3 buckets that bring in the most people to him. And let's continue with the segment.
Independence. There are a lot of reasons for this. Part of it is because Kennedy is a longtime anti-vax activist who's made conspiracy theories around COVID vaccines and virtually all other vaccines a centerpiece of his campaign. And he is backed by far-right figures like Steve Bannon. He also wins praise from Donald Trump, who would be running against Kennedy in the highly unlikely event that he were to win the Democratic nomination. And just like the ex-president, Kennedy likes to portray himself as anti-big government, anti-establishment, an outsider. But as Rebecca Traister points out in New York Magazine, Kennedy's core identity is, quote, as an insider, a member of the family that this country was taught to love above all others and to pity in their many public tragedies.
So this is the writer of this article, and this is the propagandist here. So let's listen.
Rebecca Traister joins me now. She is a writer at large for New York Magazine. Rebecca, you write about the, quote, horseshoe coalition around Kennedy's campaign, anti-vaxxers who shopped at Whole Foods, far-right authoritarians. How is this group sort of coalesced around him?
Well, it's coalesced. He's very proud of it, and he himself refers to it as a horseshoe coalition. He's very proud of pulling from both the left and the right.
Why wouldn't he be?
The way that they're coalescing around him is in his sort of, what he's spreading is distrust of institutions, distrust of elections, distrust of vaccines, distrust of medical interventions, distrust of the Democratic Party, distrust of government.
Where is he wrong in any of that? Distrust of these institutions, distrust of the government, distrust of the Democratic Party. Where is he wrong in this list of distrust that you're mentioning? But let's listen to her continue.
Distrust of the Democratic Party, distrust of government. And that is pulling both some self-described leftists who are critical of Joe Biden.
These words that they're picking is not just happenstance. When she self-described, that's to say, I'm not going to even call these people real left. They call themselves left. So that's how I'm going to describe them. Because you couldn't possibly be left and not like Joe Biden.
And it's pulling quite a few conservatives. It's also pulling a lot of support, actually, and interest, whether it's official support or not, from a kind of Silicon Valley tech bro culture. He has done Twitter Spaces conversations, and has also, Jack Dorsey, the Twitter founder, has said that he is supporting Kennedy's campaign. He has a lot of funders coming from Silicon Valley. And so that's another element that's sort of pulling it all together. Actually, all these factions have very little in common ideologically when it comes to things like, economic policy and those kinds of things. It really is this sort of sense of they're responding to his projected distrust of all kinds of institutions, which I think is part of why the power that he has is worth paying attention to and is quite dangerous.
The New York Magazine, RFK's inside job. So let's listen.
Right, you're right. That's not to say Kennedy's campaign is a joke. He is both an addled conspiracy theorist and an undeniable manifestation of our post-pandemic politics. Talk to me about that first part, saying that this campaign is not a joke, is something actually to pay attention to. What is it telling us?
So I think it's really important. He gets a lot of press for, his anti-vax views. His critics would be very angry at me for saying anti-vax, or his supporters would say that he's for vaccine safety, not against vaccines. But in fact, beyond his criticism of vaccines, and in 2006, he wrote an article in Rolling Stone claiming that the 2004 election had been stolen in Ohio thanks to debold machines. That article was disproven. Lots of other investigations in journalism suggested that was not the case.
He just says it's disproven without telling us any evidence of that. It's disproven.
It's a very seductive argument, but his distrust in election results has persisted. He still talks about how the electoral systems are rigged.
Yes.
And in fact, he was equivocal in an interview with the Washington Post when they asked, do you think that Joe Biden won the election? He said, I don't know. I think Joe Biden won. Okay, this is really important to focus on
because this is the line of attack that we can go in and tie this to January 6th. This is the line of attack we can tie to election deniers. This is why this is important to her and to the liberal media. They have to find something that they can gravitate to, connect them to Trump, right-wing conservatism, January 6th, election denier, because the anti-vax stuff is not working. You can keep calling him anti-vax. It doesn't stop people from supporting him.
Because what he is projecting to the people who are listening to him and paying attention to him is this sense that we can't trust electoral results. Now, of course, first of all, even if he is unlikely to actually win the nomination, it is also possible that if there is a rogue early primary in New Hampshire where Joe Biden won't be on the ballot, Robert Kennedy
a rogue primary
Jr. might perform well there. That then will feed potentially the notion that,
these people are definitely afraid. Listen, RFK Jr. is going to win New Hampshire and quite possibly Iowa. He's going to win New Hampshire and quite possibly Iowa. So they have to get ahead of the story with this nonsense. And you see how the ruling class, the Democratic establishment, whether red or blue, has people in all throughout media, all throughout press to write these freaking smear campaign stories to get people back in line with the ruling class narrative of red, blue only.
The elections aren't working. We're being cheated out of our choices. And we know that this kind of thinking has led to insurrectionist violence, right?
See, didn't I tell you they were gonna connect it? So his thinking of, you won't say election, basically call him an election denier, that leads to violence. You see the tying of January 6th?
questioning of the 2020 election and January 6th. There are really, really dangerous impulses that are at play here. And he's playing on a lot of those impulses.
Well,
dangerous impulses.
Speaking of playing, you also write either he has no idea what kind of fire he's playing with, or does, and is therefore an arsonist. You spent a lot of time with him. Your sort of sense if he understands the stakes beyond the winning, losing here of what it is he is putting out into the universe.
Well, it's an interesting question whether he understands the stakes. He's very driven. He speaks and behaves like a man who really thinks he might win the nomination. That is extremely unlikely. But he is speaking with a kind of authority and entitlement of somebody who believes he should be in this room, believes he should be a politician. He is also trying to have a lot of things both ways, right? So he's positioning himself as this outsider, this challenger to elite systems. In fact, the only reason that he has this kind of following and is polling it, you put up the number 17% in some polls, 9% in others, close to 20% in others, but he's polling surprisingly high because, of course, he is a product of all these institutions that he's claiming he is outside of and has been shunned by. He is a product of the Democratic Party, of one of the most famous family in Democratic Party politics. He is well connected to Hollywood through generations of his family. His uncle was the president. His father ran for president, was a senator, was attorney general. His other uncle was a senator, from 1962. And
all of the things that she's saying that makes him an insider is through his family. What has he done? How has he been elected and been part of some sort of establishment? I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying the criteria she's making has nothing to do with his politics. It has to do, your father was the president, or your uncle was the president, the one that was assassinated when he was very little. So what did he do? He was networking at 2? Like, that's so ridiculous. Or what was the other family connection? Just the fact that he's a Kennedy, that he knows people in Hollywood. So now he's not this insider candidate. So it's like they're trying to call him, don't think that he's some sort of outsider. He's actually an insider. They're saying it as if it's a smear, like if it's a slur. So if being an insider is a slur, what does that make Joe Biden?
Until his death. He comes from a family that is so politically connected, and in fact, also in political media. His friends have been people who have run magazines. His cousin, John Kennedy Jr., founded a magazine before his death. He's been published in magazines over decades, and in fact, cited those publications to me as his qualifications to be president. So he is, in fact, the only reason that he's there is because of the very institutions and his centrality to those institutions that he is telling everybody he's an outsider to and that he wants to stand in challenge to. So it's what he's doing, he's playing out of both sides of his mouth in a lot of ways.
So he's playing out of his mouth because people view him as an outsider. He's an outsider in the sense that he's never ran for office, I don't think. Yeah, he's never ran for office. Or if he has never ran for president, is what I should say, because I don't know if he's run for office, to be quite honest with you.
Add to that analysis, Rebecca, something that you touch upon in the piece, which is the idea that the ground was softened for him to do that by Donald Trump, by someone who was not an outsider.
See, they're trying so much to tie him to Donald Trump.
Someone who has already been president of the United States, who's still trying to position himself as an outsider.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the faux outsiderism. It's all connected to the sort of cancel culture. When somebody disagrees with you or says that, in fact, the science you're claiming is not true, that means you're being shunned, you're being censored, you're being canceled. There's this, the martyrdom of, in fact, often the very powerful white man, right? That is what Donald Trump has played on, a man with a very famous name like Kennedy's. There are a lot of Trumpian aspects to Kennedy. And, you know, somebody who has been culturally central, who the media has covered for years before they got into politics, now positioning themselves as a brave outsider, you know, charging the walls. And it's a lie, right? It's not actually factually true, as you know, that's true of many of the conspiracy theories that he spews too. But people are very eager for that myth.
Rebecca Traister, you knew that I was at time. Thank you so much. It is all in her incredible piece still to come.
And I have that piece up. I'm not going to, you know, read all of it, but it's New York Magazine, and it was written a few days ago. RFK's inside job, how a conspiracy spewing literal Kennedy posing as a populist outsider jolted the Democratic Party. Like, this is the people who are voting for him already distrust people like you. You're literally not doing anything. These articles and these things that Joe, like on what's it, Morning Joe, the people who would support RFK doesn't watch you. The people who support Donald Trump doesn't watch you. So all this stuff you're putting that doesn't reach the people that if you're trying to lower their profile, lower their support. She actually interviews him.
The Kennedy Conspiracy, written by Rebecca Traister. While waiting for his plate of meatloaf, gravy, and an iceberg wedge at an empty restaurant in Concord, New Hampshire, on the first day of June, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was gently explaining to me that nobody knows whether HIV is the sole cause of AIDS. They were doing phony, crooked studies to develop a cure that killed people, he said of the scientists laboring through the 1980s on the array of protease inhibitors and other antiretroviral drugs that would eventually stem.
We don't need to go through this. They're clearly bringing up this stuff about HIV to immediately discredit him in the beginning. This is the let me pull some of the most fringe or out there things they say and put those on Front Street so we can label him the loony conspiracy theorist. That's what they want to do to RFK. And I reiterate, not a supporter of RFK Jr., just calling it like a kid, and they are definitely afraid of RFK Jr. And it's because he has the ability to actually pull in the support that the Democrats wish they can get. Those Republicans, the crossover Republicans, he can pull that. And he can make this primary very embarrassing, even if they don't have a debate. He can make this very embarrassing for Joe Biden if you don't consider what he's already done as embarrassing to Joe Biden.